Okay, we have Sammie Smith here, and Sammie was with Florida State University, went to Apopka High, I'm going in reverse here, and then Miami Dolphins, and then Broncos.
Yes, sir.
Denver Broncos for a while, so you covered a lot of friends, a lot of people, and so Sammie, you fellowship Christian athletes now, and getting ready to go to Ole Miss, I understand.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So,
excited.
Say it again?
Excited.
Yeah. So tell me about your journey. Let's start in who influenced you in middle school, high school?
Well, I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to speak at a prayer breakfast in Apopka. And prior to that prayer breakfast, I had time to kind of consider who had been very influential in my life as coaches. And one of my first coaches in organized sports was a man named Red Johnson from Apopka.
Yeah.
And I played for a city league basketball team, and the name of our team was Gentry. We were sponsored by Gentry Insurance in Apopka, and certainly Mr. Johnson was a great man. His son was a really good friend of mine. His son played football with me all through middle school and high school, and then he went on to play college football at NC State and remains a great friend of mine today. His dad really taught his kids values and certainly had a huge impact on me in getting involved in sports.
And so you had those influences, and so those people were volunteers, were all of them volunteers?
Yes, yes.
It's a big deal when volunteers, they don't know the impact they have on people's lives always.
They don't. And, when you have an opportunity to work with young people and to do it simply because you love young people and you love God, the impact is immeasurable that you'll have on young people's lives because they can see. Young people know when you're there because you want to be, and they know when you're there because you have to be. And big difference when you want to be doing something to help people out.
That's right. That's right. And so tell me about, you had some big influences at Florida State. By the way, for those who don't know, tell me about track and field and high school. How fast were you?
I was pretty quick. I was a state champion 100 and 200 meter sprinter in high school my junior year. And my senior year, I was up there pretty high. I think I finished maybe second in both of those events. And I had a great man that trained me in high school, Coach Joe Johnson and Joe Joyner, two Joes. Great men, and really developed a love for track and field in middle school. My middle school football coach was Marcellus Alexander, and he was my track and field coach, and I was a county champion in the 100 and 200 yard dash in middle school. So developed a great love for track and field at a young age, and continued to run track and field when I was at Florida State University, where I was.
Oh, you did that with football?
Oh, yes. Yes, I was a conference champion in the 100 and 200 meters twice at Florida State.
That's crazy. Every time I hear your story, I hear a little more. A little bit more happening there. So tell me about your Florida State days. Get into Miami. Talk about that, because people need to hear the pain and the highlights, the good, the bad of your story, so that they can understand what you do now.
Florida State went there with great expectations. I was the highest recruited offensive player in the country, and signed with Florida State. And of course, after I signed, we had a great class. Guys like Deion Sanders and Chip Ferguson, Pat Tomlin, a lot of guys that came on board after we made the decision to go to Florida State. And we had some great years. We were a part of the class that helped turn that program around and start what would go on to be, I think, a 14 or 15 year run of being in the top 5 every year. So we had some great opportunities at Florida State to perform on the football field. And then I saw a lifelong dream come true, to be a first round draft pick in the NFL. That's what I aspired to be, and God opened those doors for me. But certainly that wasn't the end of it. Along came with that was some very tough times. Career didn't go quite as well as I would have liked it to go while I was at Miami. Went through some rough patches there, and found myself, 4 years later, being injured and out of the league. But God was always doing something in my life. I think that those things happen for a reason. They happen to developed me into the man that I am today, and developed me into the father and community person that I am today, and someone that loves Christ, and wouldn't trade him for anything in the world if they were going to get me to where I'm at today. But certainly were some tough times, but again, times that built me and helped mold me.
And, you know, the most touching part of that story to me was when you had a hard fall, somebody hit you hard, hit the track. Coach Shula, you were going to come out. Shula says stay in, and Marino starts trying to take care of you. So tell me about that story that happens over the next week and the events of your life.
Well, I can remember the game. It was a Kansas City game. I wasn't a hard hit or anything. Got tackled and had a concussion actually from my head hitting the turf there, and should have probably not been in the game anymore that game, but continued to play and had a turnover in the game that was a costly turnover and really changed the whole direction that my career was going from then on. You know, I can remember coming to the sideline and that was being my first game back from an injury, and Coach Shula giving me the instructions prior to the game that if I got tired and needed to come out, to just motion to him and he'd get me out of there. And when that happened, when I was tired, it actually happened after me having 4 or 5 consecutive first down runs. Mm-hmm. And the game plan changed in the middle of the game. I tried to come out and Coach Shula said stay in. But, you know, it's just one of those things. Again, it's all in God's plan.
Yeah. How
those things transpired were things that would get me to where I'm at today. And again, you know, if I had to do it all over again, if that's what it would have taken for me to come to the knowledge of who God was in my life and who he could be and how life could be if I would follow him, then certainly I'd take that path again.
That's right. But there was more pain there. Mm-hmm. Tell me about your son that week and then the next week.
Well, during that season, I lost my son to SIDS. It was a bye week. I actually came home to Orlando that weekend from Miami, and my son had his 2-month shots that day, and I'll never forget calling my wife and asking her how the shots went. You know how his Jesus, can't even think straight right now. How his appointment went to get his shots that day. And of course, she told me everything went fine, but the doctor told her one thing, that the medication that they give toddlers at that age can sometimes make them drowsy, and to kind of be mindful of him that day. And but the report that I got from her was really good. And late that night, some told me to go home, to drive back to Miami when I had just driven home to Apopka. And I got in my car and drove to Miami, and first place I went was to my son's crib, and when I reached in, he had passed. Oh. So I know it was meant for me to be there, that God didn't want my wife to wake up the next morning and find our son passed and me to be way in Orlando. So that was just God moving me to go home, and that was something that we had to deal with as a family that certainly you never get over it. It's always going to be a hurting thing. You always think, you know, and try to picture what he would have been like and what kind of man he would have grew up to be. But certainly we know that he was in a better place than we were, you know.
And you have 2 children now.
Amen. Got 2 children now. I actually got 3.
Yeah.
My oldest daughter was actually about 19 months old when my son passed. Okay. So we have pictures of them together, and the memories will certainly last a lifetime. But that was a difficult time for me and my wife.
Yeah, for sure. Denver, you ended up in Denver, but then we'll shorten the story so we can get to where you are now. But you ended up in prison for a while. Tell me what happened, why that happened, and some of the pains from Miami to there, and who took care of you.
Well, actually, after my career was over in Denver, I had a career and an injury there. And I came home back to Central Florida with aspirations of doing great things. Started a company building homes, trying to help unfortunate people that couldn't afford to buy homes, that couldn't get mortgages. And my idea was that I would build homes and hold mortgages for folks, help them get their credit in order, and then try and sell them the house, 2-3 years later. So I had great intentions, and I came home and just got around some old buddies that were involved in things that were unseemly. Of course, they were involved in dealing drugs, and I got plugged into that. And I would find 10 months later, after being involved in that, that I was getting ready to go to federal prison.
Oh.
And again, that was a life-changing thing that happened in my life, but it was a thing that was needful. You know, if God would take getting me out of a situation and having to put me in prison to get my attention, I appreciate it, because it was that night that I truly understood what it meant to accept Christ.
Oh.
So I had accepted Christ on several occasions prior to that. As a young man, I had been in church, and the sermons were great, and the praise and worship was awesome, and I felt compelled to go up and give my life over to Christ, and with tears in my eyes, and then I would leave that service feeling like a changed young man, and then 2 or 3 days later I'd be back to the old Sammie, you know, just back to living according to the worldly standards. But that particular night when I was in prison, it was just me, those walls, the bars that were in front of me, and an opportunity to spend some time with my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And that's the night that I had an opportunity to do an overview of my life, and to see how blessed I had been, how God had blessed me immeasurably with the talents that I had, and with the financial abilities that He had given me, and how unfrugal I had been, and how unfruitful I had been with those opportunities. And it was an opportunity for me to really tell God that I was sorry, and to truly ask Him to come into my life and change me and transform me into a new man. So I would have to say that night, although it was one of the worst nights of my life, you know, getting taken from my home and my freedom, and having to, you know, look at a prison sentence possibly in my near future. But it was the night that I fully surrendered and had a true experience with Christ, and the night that I surrendered all and decided that I was going to follow Christ, and wherever He lead, I was going to go.
Somebody, you know what, I haven't ever talked to you about your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I did get to meet them the night that last banquet we were at, but ran to a guy by the name of Ron Chapman. Ron's a good friend of mine, and he had worked some with your dad. He was had a roofing company, Ron did. And he said, your parents are just amazing people, loved your dad. What all happened between you and your parents while you're in prison? I know those guys had to be supportive. I don't even know them. I don't know the story. Let's talk about them.
Man, they loved me. They loved me no different than had I been a son that did everything right. You know, their love never changed. They supported me through difficult times. They did what mother and a father are supposed to be and supposed to do. They were there for their son. My dad, best dad you could ever have. You know, I wouldn't trade my dad for the world. My mom, same. She just retired from 35 years of teaching at Zellwood Elementary. And just great supportive folks that love their kids. I've got 2 younger brothers that, you know, are 5. One's 5 years younger than me, and the other's 6. They're a year apart. And we've had the support of our parents throughout life, and still do to this day. You know, whenever I need some advice or someone to talk to, even like in this situation where we're deciding to move and go to Oxford, Mississippi, to work with Ole Miss, you know, I confided in my parents and sought their wisdom, and they've always been there and supportive, and again just been a blessing to us as young men growing up in their household. Yeah,
and I tell you what, they are. Those are some honorable people. That's the type of parents that you want, and that's the type of parents I want people to hear about.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that. We've never talked about them before. Now tell me about the coaches. So the NFL, was the NFL the ones who came and stood beside you while you're in prison until you got out? Who was it that stood beside you?
Well,
coaches-wise.
You know, the first group of people that reached out to me while in prison were all my coaches at Florida State. Certainly, you know, Coach Gerke here in Apopka and the local coaches that were a part of my life, you know, they were certainly always in my life. but Coach Bowden, Coach Jim Gladden recruited me when I was at Florida State. The chaplain that's still there now, Clint Purvis, reached out to me. I got my first Bible in prison came via Clint Purvis with an inscription in it, encouraging me. He's still at Florida State today. Matter of fact, he called me a few weeks ago and congratulated me on the opportunity and the work that God's calling me to do with Ole Miss as their life coach and chaplain. And he jokingly told me, "You're gonna lose your first game as a chaplain because Florida State plays them the first game." But just great people, all the coaches. Coach Bowden had reached out to me, and Coach Bowden has always been supportive. I've just had nothing but really good people in my life, but never really had much contact with Coach Shula and Coach Tassif. I don't even know if he was even still alive at that time. Coach Tassif passed. He was my running back coach at Miami. I can't remember when he passed, but Tony Nathan was certainly a good friend of mine, and I didn't know Tony's story until I just saw the movie that came out here over the last year or two, Woodlawn.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. Tony Nathan's is one of the main characters in that movie, and
Wow.
I didn't know his full story. And my ex-wife, my first wife, was really good friends with his wife, and she didn't know their journey. If you haven't seen Woodlawn, go and see it.
Oh, yeah, Woodlawn's amazing movie. And amazing God encounter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was an amazing person.
Yes, he is.
And,
Still is.
And his family.
Yes.
This is his dad, mom. So, okay, now, how did you get to Fellowship Christian Athletes as far as your Lake County representative? Now you're moving to Ole Miss. How did that happen? And
well, in 2010, Wade Robinson, who's our multi-area director for Fellowship of Christian Athletes here in Central Florida, had reached out to me from someone. He had gotten my phone number, and he contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to come and speak at the 2010 Capital One Bowl, which featured Alabama and Michigan State as the teams. And of course, I had been getting opportunities to go and speak at different places, different venues, and they were smaller venues. They were things that I could do and kind of stay under the radar. So when this came up, quite honestly, I really didn't want to do it. And I kind of told Wade, let me check my schedule and see if I'm able to do that. And immediately when I hung the phone up with him, God spoke to me and said, "Son, how long are you going to hold in this testimony that I birthed in you? You promised me that you were going to share the gospel and that you were going to share what I've done in your life." And I called Wade back within probably 5 minutes and told him that I was free. But that started a journey for me, being there and sharing in front of probably 700 or 800 people. My journey, it gave me the confidence that I had a story and that I had something to offer people that I had gone through in life that could be a help to folks, and gave me the confidence to start sharing that. And 2 years later, I'm filling out an application and going through tryout training to become an FCA missionary here in Lake County. And it's been a great journey, but the journey continues. It's taken me to Oxford, Mississippi now.
so, yes, and we're going to miss you terribly, and I'm going to miss you personally. But you got to do what's right, and what's right now is that's the opening God's got for you. You got your business here with a training facility, and that's been a great blessing. Tell me, to those people thinking about volunteering, whether it's in Fellowship of Christian Athletes, FCA, whether it's in the school system, whether they're full-time teachers or coaches, what are some things that you would just want to do to say to them that, hey, you can do this, or you can continue on doing this? Tell them, because there's always pain and suffering in serving. But there's good times too.
The reward is immeasurable. When you have the opportunity to impact, for me, especially young people, working with Fellowship of Christian Athletes here locally in our high schools, and we had some time there that we were able to get into middle schools. And my business here, Kingdom Impact, is if you look out, there's young men that are here that I get the opportunity to do life with. You're on journey with these kids when you're here serving with them, and you're having the opportunity to share their journey and to hear their stories, to hear their struggles, and to be able to pour into them to help them get through some difficult things that most of us of our age or older have gone through. And to be able to give back is just immeasurable. One of the things we ask for with FCA is when we ask for people to join and become a part of what we do with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, we ask for their time, talents, or treasure. All right? That means if they don't have funds to give to help support, certainly they would have some time. You know, if they don't have the time, maybe they have a talent that could help with events or anything, you know. So any type of way that you're able to give and be supportive and to help in youth related ministry, again, the reward is immeasurable. When you see young people, I've got a few kids here that did their signing. I had one kid that did his signing here to go to college.
Wow.
He chose to come here and do it here at our facility. And we had a radio show going on at the same time here.
Oh, wow.
So when you see things like that happen and you see kids that you've had the opportunity to walk alongside, and now they're on that other part of their journey, and they're going to still remain close to you and still be a part of your lives, I can't tell you how important and how, you know, great that makes you feel to know that you had some part into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me about the most meaningful, or the story that of a student that, without their names, but that that just, wow, you know, whether it occurred 5 years later. I mean, sometimes that stuff, you'll do something and 5 years later you'll find out about it, that you've helped somebody. Tell me about that student that you've impacted, that you were just amazed at what God did.
Well, it's probably been a couple years ago now. A kid that grew up in the Leesburg area that really didn't have a father figure in the home, and I don't know what his mother's situation was, but he was living with his grandmother, and he was getting in all kind of trouble over at Leesburg, and he was able to leave there and go over to South Lake. Man, he got around some great coaches, Coach Willem and the staff over there that are good, godly Christian men that are pouring into their players. And then I got a chance to come into the picture and start walking alongside of him, and to see a kid like that, when the things are stacked up against him, that finds his faith and starts to believe and starts to serve God, and is interested in knowing about Jesus, and transforms his life by accepting Christ, and to see him get an opportunity to go and play college football and to graduate, you know, from high school, all the things that the number says he wouldn't do. We honored him at one of our golf tournaments, and I got a chance to introduce him and to watch him get up there to speak, you know, and address the crowd, and to see a young man that, you know, basically turn into a man. Yeah. I couldn't really hold back the tears. I was so proud of what God had done in his life. You know, because in some aspects you see some of the things you've gone through, and you see how God has, you know, transformed your life, and then when you see him do it in someone else's life, you know, that came from lesser circumstances, that didn't have, like I just spoke about, my parents didn't have that type of support, but God was his support, and he made it. That would have to go down, I think, as one of the most memorable opportunities I've had to walk alongside a kid and to see a kid get on the right track and get rewarded for it.
That's huge, and those are the things that would you say that things like that happening help people like yourself, like me, like any youth worker, whether they're full-time paid or whether they're volunteers, public school or church, are those the things that keep you going?
I think those are the things that keep you energized and keep your desire to serve, and to keep your drive, and to keep you hungry, to keep you, stay in the course, and to be all in. You know, this is one of the things I think when you're going to work with young people and you're trying to change lives, you got to be all in. You know, and I say that to mean that You got to be willing to go the extra mile. You got to be willing to pray for these kids. You got to be willing to let God transform your life. You got to be willing to pour into the young people and use the experience, some experiences that maybe you don't want to really share and talk about. Man, you got to be transparent to be able to open up, because those are the things that are going to help these people grow, help these young people know that when they fall, they can get back up as long as they're holding on to Jesus' hand.
Yeah, yeah. Any last words that you want to just tell people you wish that you could say to people before but didn't get a chance to?
Well, I think I say pretty much everything that I want to say. God is good. I'm going to miss this area on my new journey as we leave to go to Oxford. My desire is to live here in Central Florida. This is home for me. I want to be obedient, my family and I, and if God's calling us to go leave the area now to do work, then we want to do work. But I think that God honors and He hears our hearts and our desires. And my desire is to one day come back home and be here. This is where I want to live and retire. And so keep us in prayer as we go on this next journey in life, my family and I.
All right. Yeah. Say hello to your wife for me and your kids, and hopefully we'll talk to you when you're in Ole Miss.
Amen.
All right.